3rd November, Kaushik Sarkar, 8th November. We have started Green Corridor. I am thankful and grateful to our police department. With my simple telephonic call, they arranged everything. They have not seen my face. I don't know their face, who is talking, and they did not know whom is talking to them. But they did everything within telephone call. And my telephone is 24/7. I usually do my work up to 1:30, 2 a.m. at night. In my home, it is my office running. Now, first case of Green Corridor in West Bengal, there is a landmark. We have done it, and we could make it possible with your effort, with your good wishes. This is not our only effort. It is your wishes, all our people. From Apollo Gleneagles Hospital to SSKM Hospital, 18 kilometers. The organ, that is liver, arrived within 11 minutes. This is a great achievement of our state government. We are not deserving credit only. The police department and other sectors are also credit deserving. But unfortunately, at the time, those notorious nexus, who were very afraid of and scared of losing their existence and their bad activities, if such type of organ cadaver transplantation is going on, they will lose their business. They are now starting to blame us, to blemish us, and to pointing out and trying to find our faults. It is evident. Please be careful. And we are also aware of that. But we are not in despair. But we will not be afraid and stop our work. So long I am here, so long people are with us, our government will continue. And as a government servant, I will continue to serve our people. And once again, I am grateful to this nice gathering and get together. And I am very glad. So much I have told. I gained knowledge much that my whatever I speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar. Our only request is keep up the good work and train your successors and colleagues to act the same way as you have done. So that, project cannot be implemented by one person. That's an axiomatic nature's law. I think you have broken the jinx. Let us hope that the entire government is going to learn a lesson from you. Thank you. Now we move on. I think a very important subject, Dr. Vivek Jha, coming all the way from Delhi to talk on deceased organ donations, problems and solutions, legal, ethical and otherwise.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amit Ghosh. I'm thankful to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and of course to Dr. Ghosh and to Dr. Lakshmi Narayan for asking me to come and be with you this afternoon and talk to you a little bit about where we are in terms of global development of deceased donor transplantation, which is commonly known as cadaver organ transplantation. So I think the facts and figures have already been presented to you, so I won't bore you with that. What I would like to do is to pose it to you that organ donation is a national duty and a national responsibility. I work with the World Health Organization as an advisor to organ and tissue transplantation, and the World Health Organization has declared it as a matter of national self-sufficiency, that it is the duty of all healthcare jurisdictions to provide to its citizens the possibility of getting an organ when it is required. So it moves away from being just an issue of a right to ordinary healthcare, but it becomes a duty of the society to, because here this is something which a person cannot just get by himself or herself. This is an act which requires the involvement of an altruistic donor, whether it's a live donor or cadaver or deceased donor, and the support of the entire healthcare system to make it all happen. So I think we are talking about deceased donor transplantation. On this slide, you see the statistics in terms of the number of deceased donor transplants which are conducted in different countries around the world. So I think the figures are too small for you to see, but the top two countries with the largest sized bars are Spain and Croatia, followed by Malta and USA. And in those countries, every year, there are about 35 cadaver donations per million population per year. Okay? And right at the bottom, you have Dominican Republic, which is 1.8 per million population per year. Where is India in this? India is certainly nowhere. And in India, the state that we hear about so much, the state from which Dr. Sunil Shroff comes, and he will certainly tell us about it, is the state of Tamil Nadu, which has a cadaver transplantation or deceased organ transplantation rate of about 1 point something million. Is that right, Dr. Shroff? One point between close to 2 per million population per year. So it is the size of the smallest bar in this particular slide. So what it says is that we still have a long way to go, despite all the improvements, and we'll discuss the reasons for those improvements and the reasons also and the potential solutions of how that can be taken. You are all, many of you here are doyens of industry, and you would have heard about a book by Peter Thiel, who is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who has written a book called 0 to 1. And according to him, it takes more effort in going from 0 to 1 than in going from 1 to 10. But in this case, in the case of deceased donor transplantation, I would suggest that it takes actually more effort to go from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 than to go from 0 to 1, because that is something which is relatively easy to do. But taking it to scale and taking it to next level is the challenge that we are all faced with, and hopefully we are trying to discuss that here. So what does it take to take a deceased donor organ from the donor or a potential organ to a utilized organ? And this is a pathway for organ donation, or critical pathway for organ donation, which was developed by us during a meeting at the World Health Organization headquarters sitting in Geneva, is that when there is a potential donor available, I won't bore you by the technical details here, a number of steps have to fall in place, which requires involvement of the entire healthcare system, which requires an enabling law, which we have in India, which then requires implementation of that law through the hospitals. And I'm glad to hear from Dr. Sarkar that that beginning has been made here in West Bengal. And this is perhaps the first reason why Tamil Nadu has been successful, because they implemented a authority or an organization which was solely responsible for making sure that those pathways were cleared and the hurdles in those pathways were really taken care of right in the beginning, right? And then comes the responsibility of individual hospitals. You all heard that it is the intensive care units where the actual donors are identified and the donor families are counseled and discussions take place, and how that happens perhaps is something that Dr. Shroff will tell us a little more about. But unless those processes are systematized inside a hospital, that is not a process which brings money to a hospital, but that is a social responsibility. And all hospitals, whether they are public sector hospitals or private sector hospitals, are actually obliged to, in order to fulfill their social obligation, to go ahead and do it. And not only that, that is the law now in India. You would be surprised to know that in terms of the law, Indian laws probably have all the enabling clauses. What really is wanting is their implementation. So the Indian law says that all hospitals must document all the brain deaths that take place in their ICUs, and all the families of every individual who has been identified to have a brain death should be approached to at least seek their consent, or they may decide to not consent, but they must be approached. I'm sure that even to many of our physician, surgeon colleagues, this comes as a surprise that this law actually exists, let alone healthcare administrators. So in fact, all the healthcare administrators are bound by law to implement this in their hospitals. But this, of course, is a matter of implementation. Even if consent comes through, there may be many other reasons. There may be medical reasons, non-medical reasons, why an organ may or may not be utilized. Then we require an actual existence of a transparent method of organ allocation. That is something which is really important, and I'll come back to this in a moment, that when an organ becomes available, who does it go to? It must go to someone through a transparent and fair process of allocation. It should not be on the basis of a person's social class or a person's economic status, or because the person can pull a few levers, because that brings distrust to the society. And that is something which is fundamental to a just, equitable, and modern society that we all aspire to become. Okay? So that is something which is important. And this is something which, and we did this, we analyzed this in our hospital, which is where I worked till recently, which was PGI Chandigarh, and we actually realized there were a number of potential donors who could not be utilized because the system broke down in places. We have to identify those potential holes in the system and must plug them. So that is something which is important. Equity is essential in achieving healthcare delivery, including organ allocation. Now here is a scene which you see very commonly in public sector hospitals. This is a scene from PGI emergency, where you have overcrowded emergency wards, and you have people who, here you see an individual who is unable to breathe on his or her own. There is a tube which has been inserted in the windpipe or trachea of that person, and here is a bag called ambu bag, and here is that person's relative who is simply pumping air into that person who cannot breathe on his own through this ambu bag. In a modern hospital, this is done through a ventilator. Okay? So this is not the job of some human being to pump air into the lungs of his or her relative when that person requires it. Now, what happens is that, imagine when this is the type of person who is most likely going to become an organ donor, because this person is likely to become brain dead and thereby become an organ donor. Now, what happens typically is that the people working in such a situation suddenly realize that this person is now brain dead, and approach that this person, who is the relative, who has been bagging this person for several hours or even days, or the others who are running around, to now give a consent to donate an organ for their loved one. And now you can easily imagine why these people feel resentful, that when my loved one required to be taken care of by the healthcare system, I did not get it. But the same healthcare system now comes and asks me to donate an organ from my... So I think this is something which is very important. This is a social issue. This is not a medical issue. And I know that this is not easy to fix. This is not going to go away in a jiffy. But unless we realize this barrier, we will not be able to, we will always continue to lament why the deceased organ donation rate in our country remains low. So this is why it will take a long time for us to go from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or 1 to whatever number that we aspire to reach. So equity, so this is a population which currently feels disenfranchised from the existing healthcare system. On the other hand, we have corporatization of healthcare, which is not to be demeaned or not to be sneezed at. But the corporatization of healthcare comes with its own challenges, because in the corporate system there is a stream of professionals whose responsibility is to make sure that the hospitals remain profitable, and the profitability brings with it its important challenges. There is always a conflict between profitability and performance of duties which will not bring so much profit but will bring more prestige. So how do you balance that is an issue which is something for us to really consider. How can we make this change now? So this is, I thought I'll show you this. This is because this is something which is not easily appreciated. This is called the health impact pyramid. So this shows you the different levels of interventions that can be made in tackling any health problem. So on the bottom is something which requires change at a fundamental level, that you change the entire socio-economic situation of the society. You know, everyone grows, and then everyone is lifted out of poverty, and then the entire healthcare system changes. The second level is to change the context to make individuals' default decision a healthy one. So here are things which have been shown to work. So for example, tobacco eradication. Tobacco eradication did not, fighting smoking did not happen because everyone went around telling people don't smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke. It became because the prices of cigarette went up and the government made laws. So you have to legislate. So the enabling legislation towards organ transplantation in India happened in 1994, and which is something which has made a lot of change. And then we have to bring in long-lasting protective interventions, and this is the stage where we are really struggling. And so here, this is where the behaviors of the healthcare organizations need to change. Is that the healthcare hospitals need to institutionalize processes that will lead to a situation where the default decision is for everyone to think when the situation is right, whether it is possible to get a deceased donor here or not. And actually the least effective and requiring the most effort is counseling and education and awareness activities, which we all like to do. We do it all the time. We do lots of awareness activities. Dr. Ghosh asked you to sign a card, but let me tell you, at the risk of upsetting him, that card is not going to make a bit of a difference. Because the organ donation, transplantation law in our country does not give any value to that card. So unless the next of kin of the person who is brain dead gives permission, even though that person has indicated his or her will in a card, that card does not give any value. And even if the person is carrying a card in his or her pocket, unless the hospital's healthcare system goes and asks that person's family, that card will continue to sit there without really doing anything. So I think we need to make those changes for that card to become really something which will bring its value. And these kind of events we have done many times in the past. And here in this was done, this we did some years ago with the Indian Society of Nephrology, Indian Society of Organ Transplantation, the Transplantation Society, and the WHO. This was an event done in Delhi, and you can see Dr. Sunil Shroff here, and this is the then president of the International Transplantation Society, and this is Dr. Jagdish Prasad, who is Director General of Health Services in New Delhi. And we, at that time, Dr. Shroff and us, and along with the International Transplantation Society, we prepared standard operating procedures and provided them to the Government of India to be used. And they are all sitting there. And if they are useful, then I'm sure Dr. Shroff and we will be happy to share it with the colleagues in West Bengal as well. So I think, these are quotes from the presidential address given by Dr. Francis Delmonico when he was the president of the Transplantation Society. The task before us is clear, and the task remains a beckoning frontier. We must increase organs from the deceased and make them available for transplantation. The challenge is to make transplantable organs from the deceased to those in need, not because they are of certain class or culture, but because they are our fellows and common man and in need of our help. The work of organ donation is hard, but it measures the best of us in humanity. So the value that it brings is more in terms of humanity, in terms of our ability to help our fellow citizens, not necessarily in terms of the money that it might generate to the healthcare system. This is a picture of Dr. Luc Noel, who was the chair of essential health technologies in World Health Organization till a few years ago, and Dr. Adib Rizvi, who actually has been able to set up a fantastic hospital or institute called the Sindh Institute of Urology and Transplantation in the city of Karachi in Pakistan. Amidst all that strife, and so this gives us hope that there is a lot that can be done. He and his colleagues have been single-handedly successful and been responsible for getting the organ transplantation law passed in Pakistan, and in setting up a hospital that in 1 year did almost 500 transplantations and lots of deceased donor transplantations. And according to Dr. Luc Noel, this is a point which was just before the meeting started. Dr. Lakshmi Narayan and I were having a side conversation. What really takes, and it gives me no joy as someone, you don't know, but I was born in the state of West Bengal, as someone who has been born in the state of West Bengal, to tell you that right now West Bengal is the most notorious state in terms of reputation so far as the buying and selling of organs in India is concerned. And it has gained international notoriety. We receive queries from different parts of the world about individuals who go to certain hospitals or the other in West Bengal and get organ transplant, and I as nephrologist see patients who have come to some certain hospital in West Bengal and gone back with a purchased organ. And as long as that activity continues, it will continue to act as a brake in successful implementation of deceased donor transplantation. More so, it tells us about the value, ethical value that we put on our societies. What kind of ethical values and human values do we consider fit to be working in a society? And this is, again, I would quote from Dr. Luc Noel: if you have a line of naked individuals devoid of external signs of societal positions, so because these donors are usually, the poorest of the poor, and you can recognize the rich from the poor by simply counting their kidneys, is that the kind of world that you want to live in? I think this is something for us to ponder. And if, because we are sitting in this room all feeling good about ourselves, that we are talking about disease donation, but I will remind you of the words of Dr. Francis Dolomonico, that the work of disease donation is hard. The work of disease donation requires societal transformation. The work of disease donation requires systematic change, but we must do it because it brings the best in us, and because we want to help our fellow citizens, not because they belong to a certain class or creed, but because they need help from those who can provide it. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take a few questions at this time or later during discussion.
We'll have the questions, but in a more organized fashion. Once we finish this, we'll have a group discussion on that. Thank you very much, Dr. Daan. I think your words of reality is definitely appreciated, but I at the same time think that we need to have a starting point. You see, meetings like this, donor kites like the ones we suggest, are only beginnings of a journey. And we are all aware there are fallacies within that. We are aware that there are failures in the moves and projects that we take. But unless we do that, unless we popularize deceased donor transplantation, there is no way we can actually stop the traffic that we want to stop. Can I now ask Dr. Sunil Shroff from Mohan Foundation to tell us about successful models of deceased donation program in India And how can West Bengal move forward? Who can be more appropriate than Sunil Shroff? A big hand for Dr. Shroff to come over.
Thank you, Amit. Wonderful to be here. And Amit, I think you have a sold-out house here. I want to congratulate
for
you
you.
for doing this in such a wonderful way and getting so much of people from Bengal Chamber of Commerce gathered here on a Saturday evening to listen to something as morbid as organ donation. Yeah. Thank you very much for being here and making this possible. Before I start, I just want to ask, how many of you are actually not doctors? Not doctors. Rest of you are doctors? I mean, accordingly, I can do my talk, I don't want to make it too much of a medical talk. So how many of you are doctors here? Okay, so we have a kind of mixed audience then. Thank you. And how many actually of you have pledged your organs? How many have actually got a donor card, perhaps? Maybe 15, 20. And how many of you really support this cause of organ donation? Some exercise is good for you as well. You've been sitting here for the last 1 hour listening to our talks, medical talks and so on. Some of it interesting, some of it not too interesting. So I thought a little bit of movement will be good. And that's why I asked you to do this exercise. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is over the next half an hour, I'm going to try and educate you a little bit, challenge you a bit, and perhaps inspire you as well. And we'll see how it goes. Let me see. I have a couple of videos. That's where I'm going to have challenge, and I'll seek help from my colleague here. Because earlier I tried to place those videos and I couldn't. Yeah, that's fine. We are okay so far. I'll call you when I need you. Vivek, I've told you about the number of kidneys we require. This is Chennai on 26th December 2004, past midnight, and something very horrible happened to my state. We were hit by a big tsunami, and we had almost 12,500 people who died from this disaster. And you might wonder, what has tsunami got to do with this talk? Kidney disease is like a silent tsunami. Every year it kills more than 200,000 people in our country. We still talk about tsunami, but we don't talk about people dying of kidney disease. And every year it is almost like 15, 16 tsunamis hitting this country. Every year, so many people dying. And we don't talk about it. We don't discuss it. And it is growing. The incidence of kidney disease is growing. That is because we have an increasing problem with lifestyle diseases. Diabetes, hypertension is ever growing, and 60% of kidney failures are due to diabetes and hypertension. And on one side, we need to look at prevention of these lifestyle diseases, and